Something that Keir Starmer was very good at opposition was he'd be wise to try and actually highlight that difference within Keir Starmer's own MPs, particularly on this issue of the benefits, because that was what Keir Starmer was always, when he was leader of the opposition, what he did very well was trying to peel off Conservative rebels on any particular issue of the day to try and minimise the support. But you know, the dynamics of the House of Commons will be vastly different from anything we've known previously, well, in recent years anyway, because you've got government benches of more than 300.
Thea, what do you make of this sort of the chatter that Rishi Sunak's been a bit wet since losing the election? He's, rubbing shoulders with Starmer and joking with him at the state opening of Parliament. He's been all, statesman-like in Commons.
I think it's fair. It's fair, but I think there's nothing in it for him anymore. He's just got to hold it over, hasn't he?
The rather wonderful thing about our democracy is that it does force people to have decent personal relationships whilst at the same time disagreeing, and I think that's something to treasure. But my question is, will Starmer be more flexible as Prime Minister than he was as leader of the opposition? Famously, he couldn't change tack, and he stuck to the brief, whatever happened. Do you think he'll be slightly more confident, relaxed?
I think whether you've got that ability to think on your feet, I think that comes naturally, and I don't think if you. And I think it's harder. PMQs is always harder for the Prime Minister who's facing the questions. And can he? And I think we'll hear a lot from Starmer trying to pin the problems and put the questions back onto Rishi Sunak, saying this was something we inherited from the Conservatives. We're going to hear that for a long time to come.
All right, Thea Ushwood, great stuff. Thank you very much. And of course, James cleverly launched his official leadership bid today, didn't he? So yeah, lots to go on that front. Priti Patel, Suella Braverman. Who do you think is going to take the mantle?
Who, me? I couldn't possibly comment. Lots of very well qualified candidates out there.
OK, right, plenty more coming up, including solar panels on Windsor Castle and Bentleys fuelled by biofuel. They're just a few of the costs listed on the annual Sovereign Grant report, paid for in part by you, the taxpayer. Are the royals worthy of your hard-earned dollar? Let us know, gbnews.com/your say. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News, back in just 2 ticks.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle, promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on the show we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of luxury Highgrove splash, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think pretty fairly priced products. And even more so, go and see the gardens. As we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs Live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 9:49 and this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Ben and Miriam.
Right, now the monarchy is set to receive a boost of more than £45 million. That's with a 53% jump in its official annual income to more than £130 million next year.
Historian and broadcaster Rafe Hadel-Manku joins us now. Good morning, Rafe.
Good morning.
Is this actually true? Are the taxpayer funding the royals, or is it their own money that we give back to them?
Technically, yes. In reality, no, is a simple answer to all of that. Yes, so what we've seen here is that the monarchy's finances are going to increase. Well, the sovereign grant, which is money given to the monarchy for its official duties, travel costs, staff costs, maintaining its properties, that's currently around 86 million.
Yeah.
It's going to increase next year to 132 million, and that's because of something called the Crown Estate. And the Crown Estate are a £16 billion portfolio owned by the King in right of the Crown. So not his personal property, but his property as sovereign, includes Regent Street, parts of St James's, but also the seabed around the country. And it's that 12-mile seabed that's actually the reason for this temporary spike in profits, because the Crown Estate has been leasing off wind farm project rights, and because of that they've had their profits more than double to 1.1 billion. Now the King at the start of his reign always surrenders all that money to the Treasury, so the Treasury gets 88% of that 1.1 billion, 968, and the monarchy gets 12%, 132. So it's one of those things where everybody's a winner, which is a nice story to say, and actually the King should be getting 25% of that. He should actually be getting 275 million, but His Majesty, knowing they was going to have this windfall, decided that the bulk of that 13% should go to the public good. So another reason to be grateful for our King.
Right, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I'm going to take the role of a Republican and say, why do we need these royals prancing around in big palaces like Buckingham Palace, Clarence House and so on? They spent £166,000 having a jolly around Kenya, Charles and the King. Lots of
a jolly.
Lots of other royal tours. When so many people are struggling with the cost of living, there's a homelessness crisis, why should we be paying
well,
for these people?
The main point is, of course, as we've just explained, we're not paying, actually. So whilst, you know...
But that money could be spent for other causes.
Well, the important thing to realise, of course, is that the cost of the monarchy is actually only around 77 pence per person, if you exclude the cost of refurbishing Buckingham Palace, which, of course, you would need to do. The French still look after Versailles, after all, don't they? So 77 pence per person, that's not even the price of a cup of tea at McDonald's.
And this is the question, isn't it? Do we want a presidential system that's not free at all, and it has political disadvantages, certainly, or do we want this rather uniquely British arrangement where we allow Charles to be king, he gets to keep some of his money and we take the rest? It's very uniquely British, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think 77 pence is a lot to pay for 1,000 years of history and tradition and stability, and that's what the monarchy provides us with. And we're not a small country like Belgium or the Netherlands, which have bicycling monarchies. You know, we are a great power, a large country, and the monarchy must be seen to be believed, because you have the monarch as the head of state, but also as head of the nation. It's those important functions of social cohesion and civic society, opening hospitals, going to soup kitchens, going to see St John's Ambulance, homeless shelters. That's where the monarchy really comes into being, as being a vital part of the social fabric of this country. So we need a large royal family to go up and down the breadth of this land, performing those important functions.
There's some great colour from the accounts. For example, Prince William took home £23 million of private income. He will pay tax on that, won't he? Frogmore Cottage, where Harry and Meghan were once living, they, of course, funded the £2.5 million renovation. That's been empty for the last year.
But they've refunded that money, so they've paid that back.
They've paid that back. But also, solar panels on Windsor Castle. Is this a sign of the King's green agenda at play?
Absolutely. We also learned that the Bentleys have been repurposed to run on biofuel, with a view to also having a fleet of electric cars. There are 2 new helicopters coming in, it should be said as well, on the other side, but that's because the current ones are 15 years old, and I think we could all understand that. But there's been a 17% decline in expenditure from the previous years. It's gone from 107 million down by 17%, which is rather good to see. Also, 2,300 public engagements, 464 of which were done by His Majesty, in despite, of course, his poor health. And the most expensive trip, of course, was to Kenya, which was 166,000 to charter the flight. But it was an important visit, and I think, Britain, Britain is the world's second leading soft power, and the monarchy is a crucial part of that soft power, and the price of that, of course, is incalculable. During the...
Lovely. Sorry, we're just fast running out of time. I could listen to you all day, Rafe. You're brilliant. Your expertise is top-notch. And I think you're quite right. At a time when so much of our heritage and identity is being eroded away from all parts, it's nice to have the royal family there as a, sort of a comforting institution by our side. Right, we'll be back in just a sec. The weather's coming up. Here you go. Britain's Newsroom, back in a second.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine start out there for many of us, early sunshine, but it will turn cloudier into the afternoon with some rain coming along later. 1 or 2 showers first thing in the east, western Scotland perhaps, as well as West Wales, but otherwise most places getting off to a sunny start. Through the morning, the cloud will build and there will be further showers developing in the east of England, but there'll also be more persistent rain pushing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland, West Wales and the far southwest of Cornwall, where we get the sunshine in the south and southeast. 25, 26 Celsius, feeling very warm indeed. But where we've got the rain moving in, it's going to start to feel more unpleasant. The breeze picking up as well into the afternoon and evening. By this stage, the rain reaching Exmoor, Dartmoor and covering much of Cornwall. We keep the sunny spells into the evening for the east and southeast of England, but Wales is turning increasingly cloudy and wet. Northern Ireland by this stage also reasonably damp, as well as northwest England and western Scotland. 1 or 2 showers for the east of Scotland. Otherwise, we cling on to some breaks in the cloud through the evening and temperatures of 18 to 19 Celsius. Now, the first area of rain moves through Scotland, western England and Wales overnight. There'll also be reasonable covering of cloud spreading across the country overnight, with temperatures holding up into the mid-teens in many places. A warmer night compared with recent nights. But it's a dreary start to Thursday. Certainly a lot of low cloud around, especially towards southwestern parts. Some coastal mist and fog. And the rain and drizzle turning more heavy through the morning. Some outbreaks of more persistent wet weather moving through the south and southeast for a time. Further north, the rain is more showery, but it's a cloudy afternoon. And it's also going to be cooler as a result, with temperatures of 20 to 22 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M42 in Staffordshire, there are southbound delays towards junction 10 at Tamworth after an accident earlier. In Herefordshire, the A49 is closed in both directions off the A40 west of Ross-on-Wye after a car hit a tree. In Bedfordshire, the A507 is partly blocked where a lorry overturned near the A6 Clophill roundabout, causing delays back along the A6 each way towards there. In London, the North Circular is partly blocked eastbound by an accident off the M1 at Staples Corner, causing queues. In Berkshire, the A34 is closed southbound after a lorry caught fire with a spillage between the A339 and A4 near Newbury, with queues on the A339 into Newbury as you divert. Eurotunnel report a wait of up to an hour for passengers at Folkestone. Train services are suspended between the Severn Tunnel Junction and Cardiff Central because of a shortage of trains. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far, and it could be yours. Charles was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 24th of July. We're live across the United Kingdom, and this is Britain's Newsroom with Miriam Cates and Ben Leo standing in for Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning to you. Hope you're well at home. The Kent soldier stabbing. A British soldier is fighting for his life after being attacked near an army barracks in Kent. We'll have all the latest.
And disgraced Dujardin, six-time Olympic medalist Charlotte Dujardin has been banned from the Paris Olympics for whipping a horse's legs almost 30 times in a secret recording. Is a ban justified, or is it an overreaction?
And another trans athletes row. The new Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has said trans athletes should be allowed to take part in women's sports. Are you as outraged as this, like me?
And Starmer's show of strength. The Prime Minister suspends 7 Labour MPs for voting against the government, as today he prepares for his first battle at Prime Minister's Question Times as the Prime Minister.
OK, so here we go, a few weeks into the new Labour government, and the wokeism comes en masse. The new Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, says, yeah, it's fine for biological men to play in women's sports. Don't worry about massive muscle mass or increased ATP or bigger lung capacity or bone density. As long as your testosterone's down, that's fine, no problem.
Yes, it seems crazy, doesn't it? Because there's either a reason for women's sports or there isn't. And the reason is it's not fair to have men and women competing against each other. So what justification can there be in football, for example, of letting men in? We'll have more later, and please do keep your views coming in. Send them by visiting the website gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Tatiana.
Miriam, thank you very much, and good morning. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says he's shocked and appalled by the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Kent. GB News understands the attack is not being treated as terror-related. Witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening in Gillingham. Locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Sir Keir Starmer's to face his first Prime Minister's questions today amid tensions on the backbenches after he suspended 7 Labour MPs. It's after the Prime Minister withdrew the whip from Labour rebels because they backed an SNP motion to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. The Commons voted with a majority 260 to reject the amendment. The cap, which was introduced by the Conservatives in 2015, restricts child welfare payments to the first 2 children born to most families. Shadow Education Secretary Damien Hynes told GB News there are many other important issues Labour must deal with.
I think the bigger question is, what are some of the dividing lines, some of the disagreements within the Labour Party? They've done pretty well in keeping that, pretty much under wraps for the last few weeks and months coming up to and in the general election campaign, but there are difficult decisions for them to make. Look, they've known what the public finances are, and they've also known what their spending intentions are for some time, but they've managed to dodge the question of which taxes they're going to put up to be able to do the things that they have said they want to do. They're not going to be able to dodge that forever.
Meanwhile, nominations open this evening to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly announced last night he's running to take the party's top job. In a video emphasising his credentials, the former Foreign and Home Secretary said the Tories need to re-establish a reputation as the party that helps grow the economy and achieve their aspirations. He's the first to announce a leadership bid, and any challengers will need to get in quick before nominations close on Monday. 2 state Bentleys used by the King are to be converted to run on biofuel over the next year amid a boost in profits from the Crown Estate. There are also plans to switch the monarchy's fleet of official cars to run on electric, while solar panels have been introduced at Windsor Castle. It comes as the estate's profits hit £1.1 billion, which is delivered to the Treasury. It means the taxpayer-funded sovereign grant will increase from £86 million to £132 million. The funds will also be used to complete the final stages of renovations to Buckingham Palace. Now, a free trade agreement with India will be top of the agenda when the Foreign Secretary makes his first official trip to New Delhi. David Lammy is expected to press his Indian counterpart on what he's called driving forward greater growth for both countries. That means reiterating Britain's commitment to securing free trade with the country after negotiations by the previous government stretched on for 2 years without any agreement. Locking in the deal would deliver an economic boost, giving the UK better access to a market of around 1.4 billion people. Now, divers discovered a bronze cannon on the shipwreck of a warship that was destroyed by a gunpowder explosion in 1665. The 17th century ship, called the London, formed part of a convoy sent in 1660 to collect Charles II from the Netherlands and restore him to the throne. The prized cannon was discovered buried in silt and clay on the seabed, where the protected wreck lies in 2 parts off Southend Pier in Essex. And blues pioneer John Mayall has been remembered as a major influence on rock and roll after his death at the age of 90. According to a statement on social media, the songwriter died at his home in California on Monday, surrounded by his family. The musician's influential band, the Blues Breakers, was a launching pad for stars including Eric Clapton and Mick Fleetwood. Mayall was made an OBE in 2005. He is survived by his 6 children, 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. 10:07, Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom. Some emails flying in about our previous conversation with Rafe Head El Mankou about the sovereign grant, how much money the royal family is getting from the taxpayer. A couple that I picked up, and I'm just going to address them now. So DA said, good morning, DA. Ben, stop playing devil's advocate. People who sit on the fence get splinters. As for your snarky remarks about foreign tours being a jolly, can you think of anything worse? Such negativity doesn't suit you. Charlie, you said... By the way, just for clarity, I said, look, Rafe, let me play devil's advocate here and say the Republicans, who don't want a monarchy, would say, well, this money, these tens of millions of pounds, this could be used towards homelessness, to charity projects. Why do we need a royal family? And I did make it quite clear I was playing devil's advocate, right? Anyway, so Charlie says, shame on you, Ben, for questioning our royal family when the story was 88% went to Starmer to waste on other lefty projects. And Compo, you say, all GBN presenters are slowly revealing their lefty views. Guys, the whole point of this channel was for free speech, for open debate, something that a lot of you and a lot of the nation was saying wasn't happening on other broadcasters. So I have to say it, at a time when I sit here and say, I'm just playing devil's advocate just to widen the debate out, you know, we're all very pro-royal family, but let's give the other view for 2 seconds. Also, we have to do that according to our Ofcom licence to stay on air. Please don't say that I'm turning lefty or sitting on the fence or shame on you, because I'll be honest, it's just fairly hypocritical.
Speaking of two sides of the debate, I've got another one here from Mick. He says, just wondering, does the Prime Minister know what the questions are before they're asked? This is at PMQs.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering, as I always say, whoever was looking the Prime Minister in the eye in a folder when they're answering. Well, I think what happened in the last government is if you have someone from your own side asking you a question as the Prime Minister, they'll tell you in advance, give you a heads up, so you have a rough idea what to say. But if it's someone from the opposite side, you might not know at all. And that's why you need a red folder of all the information about every single topic you can think of, so you can quickly flick through to health or education or whatever it is. So it's a bit of a guessing game.
Oh, I thought they did get the opposition's questions, because they seem to answer on the ball very sharply.
So I think what the advisers will do is look through a particular MP's pet topics. So is there a hospital in their constituency that they want to be rebuilt? Or have they got a particular interest in another topic? So they'll have something ready, but you do sometimes see the Prime Minister or another minister being completely caught off guard, and then they normally say, I'll write to the honourable gentleman.
Is it quite nerve-wracking when you were a politician getting up in PM? Have you ever asked a question?
I've asked a few questions. It is because the House is so packed and because, of course, all the media are following it. It's different on different days, but it's very, very high pressure.
Do you ever get up to the mic and you're a bit shaky?
You have to. I always took my heels off so that I didn't wobble. So there you go.
Brilliant. Right, I just want to share something else with you. This clip doing the rounds last night of Donald Trump's vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance. So this was a clip from 2021 when he was speaking to Fox News in America, where he basically said that if you don't have kids, then you shouldn't really be in a leading political position because, quite frankly, he says, you don't have skin in the game. Take a look at this.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
So is that something outrageous, or does he have a point? I don't think he's actually saying that people who don't have children should not be involved in politics. I think what he's saying is he's making an observation. If the top of a particular political party or institution is full of people without children, are they going to make family-friendly, child-friendly decisions? And I think that's an interesting point, particularly in a world where people have children later and later and have fewer and fewer children. Does that impact the kind of decisions that people make?
So the likes of Angela Merkel, Theresa May, although she had spoken previously about wanting children but couldn't, Emmanuel Macron, Kamala Harris has 2 stepchildren who she met later in life. She didn't bring them up. Olaf Scholz, they don't have children. It's difficult, isn't it? Because I was saying to you off air, your perspective when you have children of the world does change. And I've got some friends who say, I don't want kids because I enjoy my social life and, you know, I enjoy going to gigs and so on, and I'd lose all that when I have kids. But I say to them quite gently, because it's a very sensitive subject, you know, when you have kids, and you won't realise this until you have them, all that stuff really doesn't matter anymore because you prioritise your kids, you know. So it's an interesting debate, to say the least.
Very much. We'll be talking about it more later. So, moving on now, a British soldier is fighting for his life after being stabbed outside of the Brompton Barracks in Kent last night.
The victim, who is in his 40s, is said to have been in uniform, army uniform, when he was attacked by a man wearing a ski mask.
And police have since arrested a 24-year-old on suspicion of attempted murder. And a GBNews source says the stabbing is not being treated as a terror attack.
Let's go live now to our GBNews Home and Security editor, Mark White, who is on the scene in Gillingham. Mark, what's the latest?
Well, that officer is still in a serious condition in hospital. In fact, the Chief of the General Staff, the head of the Army, has confirmed that he was indeed a military officer. He was in uniform when he was the subject of a brutal and unprovoked attack, stabbed multiple times and treated here at the scene by paramedics before being flown off to hospital in an air ambulance. Local residents here were alerted just before 6 o'clock in the evening to the sound of a scream. When residents came out, they saw that officer on the ground being stabbed, and then the suspect, who was wearing a mask, jumping onto a moped and escaping the scene. When police arrived at the scene, they managed to detain a suspect about 25 minutes or so after this incident happened. Now, the investigations are continuing, obviously, and there's stage, but what official sources are saying is that at the moment they are not treating this as a terrorist attack. Quite what the motivation was, we've not been told, but clearly there will be a great deal of concern because people still remember, even though it was now 11 years ago, people remember vividly the horrific nature of the fatal attack, the murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby in South East London in Woolwich when he was stabbed to death by two terrorists. So a lot of concern here, especially in this military town.
OK, thanks, Mark. Yeah, as you said, it sparks horrible memories of Lee Rigby's death 11 years ago, and no doubt, I suspect, his family this morning will be thinking the same. We'll have the latest on that as the day progresses. We move on now to another of the day's top stories, including Britain's joint most decorated female Olympian has withdrawn from the Paris Games after allegedly being caught on video whipping a horse 24 times during a training session.
Charlotte Dujardin, the dressage rider under fire, has said she is deeply ashamed and is currently under investigation from the International Federation for Equestrian Sports. We're joined now by Communications Manager at the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, Jennifer White. So thank you so much for coming in, Jennifer. So what's your reaction as someone who's obviously very keen on good treatment of animals? What's your reaction to this story?
I mean, it's just horrendous and, of course, completely unacceptable. With dressage especially, horses are forced to do these unnatural, awkward, difficult moves, which are just, completely unnatural to them. And the only way for, many trainers and riders to get them to do this is to use coercion and violence. And it's something that we are seeing more and more of in this sport. And that's why Peter is calling on the Olympics to ban all equestrian events.
All equestrian events, so you would prefer there to be no horse riding events at all during the Olympics. Is that something that there is strong support for? Is that quite a niche thing, or are the Olympic authorities looking at it?
Well, what makes this even worse is that this is not an isolated event. There are patterns of abuse within this industry because of how hard it is to get horses to do something that just does not come naturally to them. And actually, in the Olympics in Tokyo in 2020, there were several instances of riders and trainers beating or whipping horses. And because of that, in the modern pentathlon, they are now removing the horse element of that for the 2028 Olympics. So there is progress being made, but of course that's not enough. They should be removing all horses now because animals will continue to suffer for as long as this goes on.
Jennifer, of course, everyone who's seen this video this morning condemns it. It's animal cruelty. But the problem is, why was this released 4 years after the fact and just days before Charlotte Dujardin was due to compete at the Olympics? It seems pretty cynical. Some are saying this morning, if you really cared about animals that much, why would you wait 4 years and potentially allow that abuse to continue before releasing it?
Well, I mean, of course, the motivation for that is a mystery to me too, but I think the point is that it shouldn't have had to even come for another rider or trainer to be caught abusing a horse. We know this is already happening in the industry, and at the end of the day, horses don't care about getting a gold medal. This is animal exploitment, all for human gain, and it's just so unnecessary.
But my issue is, you guys also want to get rid of horse racing altogether, and we've spoken about it this morning with the royal family. people are saying that, you know, there's an erosion of our identity, of our culture, of everything that we enjoy. I mean, to be frank, you just want to suck the fun out of everything, don't you?
Well, I mean, tradition is never an excuse for cruelty. And especially when we were talking about a horse being whipped 24 times, all for, you know, her personal gain.
And we condemn that, but why should it be a reason to say, OK, let's just scrap everything, anything involving horses, let's get rid of it? The multi-million-pound industry, the horses who are treated so well, normally outside these isolated incidents, let's just get rid of it all because of a few bad apples.
They're not isolated incidents. This is a pattern of abuse where we are frequently seeing, you know, again at the 2020 Olympics, an Irish rider forced his horse to continue the event despite their nose pouring with blood. Another Swiss competitor, their horse was so badly injured that they had to be euthanized after the event. And this is all for human entertainment. The Olympics is about celebrating human greatness. We simply do not have to exploit animals to enjoy it.
But life does involve risk, does it not? It's not just entertainment as such, it's sport. It's pushing humans and animals to their limits.
The animals are not willing to participate.
In horse racing, there's plenty of animals, Mad Moose being a famous one, who have refused to race. I mean, Mad Moose refused to race in about 6 or 7 races in a row. They refused to come out the stalls. So I don't think...
There's a broader point here, though, isn't there? Because leaving aside the fact that this involves animal cruelty, and obviously that's shocking and everybody condemns it, but there's also a broader point about whether people should be cancelled, in effect, for misdemeanours that could be years old. And is this actually a growing trend that, you know, leaving aside, of course, what she did was wrong, but if everything we all did was filmed all the time and played in public, I don't think any of us would have a job, would we?
Well, I mean, it's interesting with dressage specifically. Over the last decade, they have made the moves that the horses are expected to do even more extreme and more exaggerated. And this means that more coercion and more violent techniques are having to be used to get the horses to do this. It's not easy to get a horse to do something they don't want to do, and it requires extreme measures. And that's why we are seeing more and more abuse in this industry. And whether or not it's being filmed, we know it's going on. And that's why something has to...
Just lastly, very briefly, because we're running out of time, what's your views on just recreational horse riding? Are you OK with that?
Well, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're obviously here to talk about...
You're from Peter, so it's just a curious question. Do you agree with people horse riding across the South Downs, for example?
Horse racing and the equestrian events at the Olympics have to be banned. There's just no place for them in modern Britain.
But you're OK with horse riding?
I mean, what people do in their free time, as long as they're being kind to horses, is not the issue that we're here to campaign against today.
OK. All right, great. Jennifer White from Peter, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
All right, great. Still more to come, including PMQs Live later today at midday with Tom and Emily. They've got a special show that's going to be with you at 11:50, I believe. So we want your questions for the Prime Minister. Go to gbnews.com/yoursay. Tell us your name, where you're from, and what would your question be for the PM, and we'll read them out a bit later. For now, though, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Back in a tick.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Tom, dying to talk to you about this. Transport for London, right? They run the buses and tubes and things in London. And they've got £2.5 million quid. £2.5 million quid, which they're going to spend on what?
Diversity training. I dare say they've probably got plenty of it already.
But let me tell you something. I sit on a board of a company and... I was diversity trained recently.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
And I must admit...
What was that like?
Well, I tell you, it was like stating the bleeding obvious, right? So you sit there and you say, well, why would I do that? Or why would I treat someone like that? I wouldn't do that in the first place. I don't need to be trained in this. And you just sat there for 6 hours while people told you the obvious. But what do you think of spending that amount of money for Transport for London?
It's crazy, because on the one hand, do we need this diversity training? The TfL is an incredibly diverse workforce already. The idea that there are barriers to entry there doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Also, as you say, these things are commonsensical, really. And to the point, sometimes they can become problematic because they're not just saying, you know, be open and tolerant of people and so on. It's actually preaching a more kind of divisive sort of rhetoric to
well, I mean,
people, which can be a big problem in the
you get your
workplace.
diversity training from your boss or somebody, don't you? Somebody
pulls you up and says, you don't talk to people like that. This is how you talk to them. That's it. Done.
It should be that
spend
simple.
6 hours in front of...
And I know that in the grand scheme of things, £2.5 million is kind of money down the back of the sofa. But at the same time, my local tube station just closes early on random nights of the week because of the fact that they haven't got enough staff.
4 years ago, there were 655 people at City Hall earning over £100,000 a year. People might argue that's 655 too many. There are 1,100 now. 4 years later.
1,100.
Actually, 1,142 to be precise.
The People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said storm.
you made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 10:23 and this is Britain's Newsroom with Miriam Cates and Ben Leo standing in for Andrew and Bev. And we're joined now by former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry here in the studio.
Morning.
Good morning.
How
now, yesterday, Nigel Farage made his maiden speech, something he's been waiting for years and years to do. And in it, he made quite a controversial suggestion. Should we have a referendum on the ECHR? And I think we've got a clip of him saying it right now.
We will only stop this if we start deporting people that come illegally. Then they won't pay the smugglers. But we'll only do that by leaving the ECHR. But I've got a fun suggestion that I think would liven up politics, engage the public and see a massively increased turnout. Why don't we have a referendum on whether we continue to be members of the ECHR?
So this is such absolute arrant nonsense. I mean, basically what he's talking about is a 5-week campaign for reform. But look, let's get a couple of things straight. The ECHR has been going since 1950, and there's only 3 European countries which aren't members of it, which is Russia, Belarus and, sadly, the Vatican City.
OK, but sorry, nor is Australia, the United States, New Zealand, Japan. Well, no, we're not part of the EU anymore.
The clue is that the word European.
But why do we need it?
European. I'll tell you why we need it, because we need to have some common, decent standards that actually apply to us in Europe. But the key thing here is British courts do not have to obey the rulings of ECHR.
Well, no, but they always do.
Yes.
They always do. And Stephen, I'm completely...
Less than 1% of ECHR rulings have actually affected the UK. Less than 1%.
Yes, but unfortunately, it sometimes is an anonymous judge in the middle of the night stopping people from leaving this country who legally have been told to get out.
Well,
it's a preposterous imposition on the British way of life, considering now we're not even in Europe, and we should get rid. And Nigel Farage, by the way, is just setting out his agenda right at the start of his parliamentary career. He knows there's not a hope in hell of this happening.
Let's do it.
We actually, we got Peter Reich, he's our judge. We have a judge on the European Court of Human Rights, a UK judge elected by when we had members of the European Parliament.
But Stephen, isn't the problem that because Tony Blair embedded the ECHR in our own law through the Human Rights Act, actually we don't have that choice. And although everybody agrees the ECHR started with good intention, it's a living convention. Judges just interpret it how they want to.
I mean, as ever, you talk a lot of sense. But look, there's only one aspect of British law which is fundamentally effective, which is the Northern Ireland Good Friday Agreement. If we pull out of ECHR, we collapse the Good Friday Agreement.
I don't. I totally disagree. That is a red herring. And when you said...
It's not a red herring, it's a fact.
And when you said there's a British judge in the ECHR, have you looked at the composition of the ECHR? Most of the people in it are not judges. Most of them are sort of legal advocates in Europe. They're not judges. It's not like they've all got robes and all that.
There's 46 judges elected by the 46 countries. All of them are legally qualified.
They might be legally qualified, but they're not to judge status. Believe me, they would not be able to sit at the Old Bailey in this country because they don't have the qualifications.
But Mike,
it's a huge European bloc to try and make everybody obey them.
But Mike, isn't Farage being a bit simplistic here? Because yes, there's lots of disadvantages of being in the ECHR, but actually it does provide for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, things that our current domestic legislation doesn't.
Yeah, but that's what it was set up for. I think it was 48, actually, Stephen. I think it was 2 years earlier than you said, in 50.
No, it was codified in 1950.
But in
September 1953.
But Churchill initiated, I think, in 1948. Anyway, the point I'm saying is, what you've just said, Miriam, is why it was set up. But now its tentacles spread into every area of our life.
Like where?
Every area of our life.
Well, stopping the small boats.
Exactly.
The most important thing.
British law stopped that.
No.
UK law stopped
when
that.
Tony Blair invented his Human Rights Act, that was to give us a mirror image of the ECHR in Europe, from which we could never withdraw from.
That's just paranoia.
It's not paranoia. I'm not paranoid.
I'm not sure I could face a referendum campaign. Would it be like Brexit again?
As our friend Brenda in Bristol would say, another one?
Oh, not another one.
Right, shall we move on?
Yes.
What about Britain? Oh, let's do James Cleverly. He's the first leader to announce his... sorry, the first leader.
Yeah.
There we go. The first Tory to announce his leadership credentials. He's launched his campaign. Will he make a good leader of the opposition, Stephen Pound?
I don't know. It's a job, to be honest. You wouldn't wish on your worst enemy at the present time. He's a strong candidate, without any doubt. But look, the point here is actually not so much James Cleverly, it's where on the Conservative spectrum does the new leader come from? Is it the centre-right? Is it the far-right? Is it the One Nation Tories? Cleverly's actually put his stall out quite well. He's known in Parliament, I was in Parliament with him, he was known for very plain speaking. I mean, you remember how he described the Rwanda plan?
Or a city in northern England.
Indeed, he wasn't particularly fond of Stockton.
Exactly.
Look, I mean, he's ex-forces, he's a strong character. I think there's some interesting people out there. Personally, from the Labour point of view, the person we'd be most frightened of, I think, would be somebody like Jeremy Hunt.
Yeah.
But, Mike, is there a problem at this?
Sorry, Miriam, to interject. I'll have to address that. You think Jeremy Hunt should... What did you say about Jeremy Hunt?
I think from the Labour point of view, if you're looking... When somebody who's not a member... And I'm obviously not a Conservative. I'm naturally looking at the person who, A, can do best for the country, but B, can actually be somebody that we could actually work with.
Yeah.
So you're saying they need someone in the mould of Jeremy Hunt?
I think that is... I mean, if all politics, if all elections are won on the middle ground, the centre ground, Jeremy Hunt...
But they're not.
But they're not.
No, the centre ground moves, doesn't it?
No, this is total cobblers. You see, James Cleverly's out of the running for me from this one expression. We need a broad appeal to win the voters back. You don't need broad appeal. You need small C Conservative policies like Mrs Thatcher brought us over a period of years and gradually work them in. All this nonsense about, One Nation Tories and you can only win an election if you win it from the middle. I don't agree at all. The reason that Tories have been shambolic for the last 2 or 3 times they've been in power is because they haven't had any policies. David Cameron started it, moved towards Liberal Democrats and embraced them, and it's been a shambles ever since.
But isn't this the problem, that people say they want unity? Well, the party says they want unity, but they don't know what to unify around. Do we need some philosophies before we have a leader?
What we need is we need some small C Conservative policies, lower taxes, smaller government, self-reliance. Those are the sort of things. Why do you think the Red Wall was the Red Wall? Because they're the qualities the people of the north of England embraced and thought, we get them here. But every time I hear a politician going right back to James Callaghan talking about our party's a broad church, what you mean is it's got a load of differing views and you're not strong enough to isolate the ones that are going to win an election.
Well, Harold Wilson used to say it's a broad church, but it's full of knaves.
And it has no religion, as Robert Jenrick has said.
And even a broad church
We're going to have
walls.
to move on. Let's hope that PMQs is this lively. But now it's time for the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much and good morning. These are the top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says he's shocked and appalled by the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Kent. GB News understands the attack is not being treated as terrorism-related. Witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening in Gillingham. Locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. Sir Keir Starmer's to face his first Prime Minister's questions amid tensions on the backbenches after he suspended 7 Labour MPs. The Prime Minister stripped Labour rebels of the whip because they backed an SNP motion to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. The Commons voted with a majority 260 to reject the amendment. The cap restricts child welfare payments to the first 2 children born to most families. Meanwhile, nominations open this evening to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly announced last night he's running to take the party's top job. In a video emphasising his credentials, the former Foreign and Home Secretary said the Tories need to re-establish a reputation as the party that helps grow the economy and achieve their aspirations. He's the first to announce a leadership bid. Nominations close on Monday. And 2 state Bentleys used by the King are to be converted to run on biofuel amid a boost in profits from the Crown Estate. There are also plans to switch the monarchy's fleet of official cars to run on electric, while solar panels have been introduced at Windsor Castle. It comes as the estate's profits hit £1.1 billion, all of which goes to the Treasury. It means the taxpayer-funded sovereign grant will increase from £86 million to £132 million. The funds will also be used to complete the final stages of renovation to Buckingham Palace. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2896 and €1.1903. The price of gold is £1,871 and 9 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,131 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thanks, Tatiana. Still to come on our show, a British soldier is fighting for his life after being attacked near an army barracks in Kent. And GB News understands it's not terrorism related. It, of course, sparks tragic memories of the murder of Lee Rigby 11 years ago. The soldier is currently fighting for his life in hospital. We'll bring you the latest as the story develops throughout the day. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Back in just a tick.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine start out there for many of us, early sunshine, but it will turn cloudier into the afternoon with some rain coming along later. 1 or 2 showers first thing in the east, western Scotland perhaps, as well as West Wales, but otherwise most places getting off to a sunny start. Through the morning, the cloud will build and there will be further showers developing in the east of England, but there'll also be more persistent rain pushing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland, West Wales and the far southwest of Cornwall, where we get the sunshine in the south and southeast, 25, 26 Celsius, feeling very warm indeed. But where we've got the rain moving in, it's going to start to feel more unpleasant. The breeze picking up as well into the afternoon and evening. By this stage, the rain reaching Exmoor, Dartmoor and covering much of Cornwall. We keep the sunny spells into the evening for the east and southeast of England, but Wales is turning increasingly cloudy and wet. Northern Ireland by this stage also reasonably damp, as well as northwest England and western Scotland. 1 or 2 showers for the east of Scotland. Otherwise, we cling on to some breaks in the cloud through the evening and temperatures of 18 to 19 Celsius. Now, the first area of rain moves through Scotland, western England and Wales overnight. There'll also be reasonable covering of cloud spreading across the country overnight, with temperatures holding up into the mid-teens in many places. A warmer night compared with recent nights. But it's a dreary start to Thursday. Certainly a lot of low cloud around, especially towards southwestern parts. Some coastal mist and fog, and the rain and drizzle turning more heavy through the morning. Some outbreaks of more persistent wet weather moving through the south and southeast for a time. Further north, the rain is more showery, but it's a cloudy afternoon, and it's also going to be cooler as a result, with temperatures of 20 to 22 Celsius.
the latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Herefordshire, the A49 is closed each way west of Ross-on-Wye, off the A40 Wilton roundabout after a vehicle hit a tree in the early hours of this morning. In Berkshire, the A34 is partly blocked southbound after a lorry caught fire between the A339 and A4 near Newbury, with long delays down the A339 into Newbury as you divert. On the M25 in Kent, it's down to 2 out of 4 lanes anti-clockwise, where the left-hand Dartford tunnel is closed because of a breakdown. There are queues towards there. On the M25 in Surrey, the inside lane's closed anti-clockwise at junction 10 for the A3, where someone's broken down, with queues from junction 11 at Chertsey. Eurotunnel report a wait of up to an hour for passengers at Folkestone, and train services are suspended between the Severn Tunnel junction and Cardiff Central because of a shortage of trains. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. It's 10:37. Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. Now, trans athletes, get this, should be allowed to take part in women's sports, and that's according to Labour's new Culture Secretary.
Yes, Lisa Nandy has said that it should be up to individual sports to decide whether they allow biological males to compete against women in their respective fields. And we're joined now by the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, Fiona McAnena. Hello, Fiona, great to see you. How are you doing?
Morning, great, thank you.
Now, of course, this doesn't actually represent any change from where we were before the election, does it? There are plenty of sports that have banned biological males from competing with women's sports, but there are also some that allow it under certain circumstances. Is this really news, or is it just the status quo?
I think it's a sign of the times that we have to be grateful to hear the Secretary of State confirm that she thinks that biology matters in sport. It's a sorry state of affairs, but that's where we are. It's the essential starting point. And I think you're right, broadly, nothing's changed. What we have is some good guidance from the sports councils that's now almost 3 years old. And for some reason, many sports are still waiting. They claim they're reviewing, or they, for whatever reason, have not been able to publish a new policy. And so we still have dozens of sports across the UK where there are male competitors in women's competitions, in women's changing rooms. It's a major deterrent for a lot of women and girls. But as I say, it's good to see that she has at least acknowledged that biology matters.
And of course, we all understand from just common sense that men and women competing together isn't fair. And we actually saw a really nasty accident, didn't we, a year ago in football, where a woman received a very career-ending injury after a collision with a trans woman, so a man. But the FA say that their rules are there to protect everybody. As long as you suppress testosterone, you can be in a women's team. Is that fair? Does that mitigate for the difference between men and women?
I think we're at the point now where everybody knows that's not fair. All the science says it's not fair. You can't turn a man into a woman by suppressing testosterone. If that were the case, then men undergoing prostate cancer treatment would have a lot to worry about, wouldn't they? We all know it's not fair. And I don't know how the Football Association can continue to defend their policy. They've got 72 male players in women's football in England alone, and those are the ones they know about. And every one of those 72 affects dozens of women.
But they would argue that their policy is lawful, because if they banned trans women from competing in women's sport, that would be somehow discriminatory. It would be illegal. Are they right?
Well, their policy may be lawful, but the alternative policy would also be lawful. So they are allowed to segregate sport on the basis of sex, and that means biological sex. There is no other kind of sex. So they have a choice, and they have chosen not to restore fairness for women and girls. So they talk a lot about how they're promoting women's sport and growing the women's game. But at the same time, they're causing harm to women and girls. And that's true for a number of sports across the UK. There's public money going into promoting women and girls' participation. And at the same time, no one is insisting that these bodies use that public money actually for women and girls. They're letting men and boys turn up.
Fiona, as a man, I just don't understand why somebody would want to compete in a sporting environment, a competitive environment, against women who are, for most of the time, physically, slower, not as strong, and so on and so on. What's the psychology behind it? Why do these biological men want to compete against women? I think they're just cheats, quite frankly. I'm not sure if you'd use similar strong language, but what is the psychology behind it?
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? Some would say they're not cheating because they're following the rules. And the problem here is the sport governing bodies have made the rules that allow this. Others would say they know damn well they're cheating. And, you know, they know they don't belong in the women's category because they have male bodies. I think what's happened is that people have decided that somehow identity has to be confirmed and validated at every turn, and they think that's kind. But this is really cruel to women and girls. It's really unkind to be saying to girls in particular, your feelings don't matter, fairness doesn't matter, even the injury risk doesn't matter, because these people matter more.
Because we often focus on the sporting side of this. Is it fair? Is it safe? But there's another side as well, isn't there? Because most sports require girls to get changed, players to get changed, and that requires single-sex changing rooms. Do you hear feedback from women who are uncomfortable with that side of the problem here, or is it just really the fairness?
We hear quite a lot about that, actually. And the thing is that you don't know whether there's going to be a male in the changing room now. If you're a member of, say, a tennis club or a hockey club, and there's a trans person who sometimes turns up at that club, then you can't go into the changing room ever knowing that it will be single sex, because that person can be there. And some of those sports have made a policy, tennis, for example, that if a woman is uncomfortable with that, she needs to come changed and not use the changing room. The same is true in canoeing. The priority is to the trans person. They have the right to use that changing room.
Sorry, Fiona, let me just get that straight. You're saying that the policy in tennis, the example you just gave, if the biological woman who's meant to be there is uncomfortable with a trans woman there, it's on the woman to remove herself from that environment. Is that what you just said?
Correct.
That's outrageous.
That's the LTA. That's also Royal Yachting. That's their policy. It's canoeing's policy. Yeah. So, you know, back to your question from before, what's the motivation of these male players? I don't know. There's probably a wide range of motivations, but I would say the motivation doesn't matter, because if I walk into that changing room and there's a man in there, I don't know what his motivation is. And it's not fair on me to have to try and guess, is he a good one or not a good one? That's why all men should stay out of women's changing rooms.
So do we need to change the law? Does the law allow sports to be single-sex, or would we actually need to amend the law to make sure all sporting bodies followed a single-sex rule?
Well, the Equality and Human Rights Commission has said that the law allows sex-based sport, and indeed that single-sex exceptions for changing rooms are also lawful. So they have said you can do this, and they're waiting for sports to do it. I think what's painful here is why we're all having to wait, and why we're waiting so long. And I really would love to see the new Secretary of State take a firmer line. We would love to tell her some of the stories we're hearing, because it's pretty shocking. But as you know, women and girls largely are afraid to talk about this.
Yes.
So it's a somewhat underreported problem.
Thank you, Fiona. We're going to have to leave it there, but very much appreciate your time. We'll be back after the break. See you shortly.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Oh no, just when I thought it was safe, here we go round again. The target this time is one of the most recognisable landmarks in London. Standing at 176 feet tall, the Albert Memorial was commissioned by Queen Victoria in 1862 to honour her late husband, Prince Albert, and was built 10 years later, a year and a century before I was born. Now, situated in Hyde Park, the monument depicts a gold statue of the Prince, alongside 4 groups of large statues which represent the 4 continents of the world: Asia, America, Africa and Europe. Now, the statues representing Asia include a woman on an elephant. America is represented by a Native American with a bison. Africa shows a woman riding a camel, and there's a white European woman reading a book to a black African tribesman. Now, the Royal Park's website claims that these statues draw on racial stereotypes. The Royal Parks, who manage parks in London, deemed it as highly offensive because it reflects a Victorian view of the world. Of course, it reflects a Victorian view of the world. It was built in the Victorian era by request of Queen Victoria. Shock, horror. And it only reflects this view, if you even know what that is. Why would this be offensive? Surely you could at least appreciate the fact and the feat of this artwork, which is quite impressive, even now. Daily Mail journalist Robert Ardman went on a tour of those incredible tunnels, and he said it goes on and on like the catacombs until you realise that you're actually going round and round a series of concentric circles. This is a monument in itself to the technical rigour and pride which went into the Victorian engineering. Exactly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:48 and this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Miriam and Ben.
Right, solar panel castles, biofuel Bentleys. King Charles' royal palaces have gone green in his first year as monarch.
The monarchy is to receive a boost of more than £45 million, with a 53% jump in its official annual income to more than £130 million next year.
OK, our man on the ground at Buckingham Palace, GB News national reporter Charlie Peters gives us the latest. Charlie, some Republicans, some critics of the royal family would say this money's better spent on the needy, the homeless, charitable causes, but actually it's just a fraction of what the Crown Estate earns, isn't it?
Well, hi there, Ben. Hi, Miriam. Well, you've joined me at a great time, actually, because it's the changing of the guard going on right now as we speak. We just point to the camera here. The King's division there, the Guards division coming through towards Buckingham Palace. Huge crowds here gathering for that on the day that the Sovereign Grant Report is published. And as you say, Ben, there is this conversation about how this money is spent and should taxpayers' money be spent on the royal family. But I think that's based on a short misunderstanding of how the system actually works. So the sovereign grant is based on the Crown Estate. It's a £16 billion portfolio based on all of the land and property that the Crown Estate has possession of. That generates quite a large amount of profit, as you can imagine, hundreds of millions of pounds, and they give 100% of that to the Treasury, and His Majesty's Treasury in return gives back 25% of that for the sovereign grant. 15% is for the core grant. A further 10% has been given in recent years for the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace, the Grand Palace behind me now, which is in rather a poor state of disrepair in some cases, with leaks and concerns about fire at the top of the agenda there. So how much money actually is it? Well, it's £86.3 million is the total of cash that's been given in the sovereign grant. The core of that is about £51.8 million. And what do they spend it on? Well, it's the running of the day-to-day royal household operation. Some 500 plus staff there, £31 million at least in salaries. But then after that, here's where the controversy comes in. It's travel. £4.2 million on travel and attending official duties in the last year of 2023 to 24. And quite a lot of that was on foreign travel. The most expensive trip on an RAF Voyager was £166,000 on a flight to Kenya, which also included separate flights for household staff. Of course, they've got to attend on every overseas visit. Another trip also to France, the other overseas state visit since the coronation, taking in hundreds of thousands of pounds as well from the Sovereign Grant Fund. The coronation itself, you have to remember, that came in the last grant as well in May of last year. That cost £800,000 from the grant, millions of pounds in total when you include the policing and military operation of such an occasion. But when it came to what Buckingham Palace had to spend, 800 grand, quite a lot of that on resizing the King's imperial crown and indeed his robes for both His Majesty and the Queen, both needing to have kit refitted for the big day. So how much does that cost us, the taxpayer, per person? It's 77 pence for the core grant, £1.29 when you include the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace. But as I said, that's money coming from the Crown estate that's given back to Buckingham Palace, and that potentially quite confusing transfer of it going to the Treasury and then being returned for them to spend as they see fit.
Charlie, so it's quite a confusing arrangement, isn't it? Because the royal family are privately very wealthy. They've built up property and land over hundreds and hundreds of years, and they profit from that. But they give it back to the taxpayer first, and then the taxpayer pays them back. Is that how it works?
That's how it works, yes, and it's based on 2 years prior, the financial reports, not from the most recent year. And that's very interesting because this year, the Crown Estate reported a bumper profit of £1.1 billion, almost doubled their income. And that's due to the coastal areas they have, the seabeds, being leased out to wind farms. That's bringing in significant profit from investment made in that area. So in a couple of years' time, we could see the sovereign grant bringing in a significantly more amount of money with that 15%, although there are expectations that it might be reduced as the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace is completed. That was passed in 2017 by Parliament, those additional funds being given back from the Treasury, having originated from the Crown Estate. One more point I want to bring out from this sovereign grant report, and that's on diversity. Now, we do know that there is an increased agenda from the monarchy to appear more in line with modern political trends, and they are keen to point out that now 11.4% of staff in Buckingham Palace are from ethnic minority backgrounds. They've got a target of 15% by next year.
OK, Charlie, outside a sun-drenched Buckingham Palace. Not jealous at all. Thank you. We'll be back with you later during the show. OK, right. Interesting, isn't it? I think it's great for our history, our heritage, our national identity, and at a time when everything's being eroded away slowly, there seems to be some kind of agenda at play.
I'd be really interested to know if every year when these figures are published, do the approval ratings of the royals go up or down? Do people care about this? Do they think it's a waste of money?
I shouldn't think they care.
Or does it just remind them that the royal family are
I don't think they care. Look, stay tuned. We're going live to PMQs very shortly. The Prime Minister's heading from Downing Street to Parliament. But first, here is your weather with Aidan.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine start out there for many of us, early sunshine, but it will turn cloudier into the afternoon with some rain coming along later. 1 or 2 showers first thing in the east, western Scotland perhaps, as well as West Wales, but otherwise most places getting off to a sunny start. Through the morning, the cloud will build and there will be further showers developing in the east of England, but there'll also be more persistent rain pushing into western Scotland, Northern Ireland, West Wales and the far southwest of Cornwall, where we get the sunshine in the south and southeast, 25, 26 Celsius, feeling very warm indeed. But where we've got the rain moving in, it's going to start to feel more unpleasant. The breeze picking up as well into the afternoon and evening. By this stage, the rain reaching Exmoor, Dartmoor and covering much of Cornwall. We keep the sunny spells into the evening for the east and southeast of England, but Wales is turning increasingly cloudy and wet. Northern Ireland by this stage also reasonably damp, as well as northwest England and western Scotland. 1 or 2 showers for the east of Scotland. Otherwise, we cling on to some breaks in the cloud through the evening and temperatures of 18 to 19 Celsius. Now, the first area of rain moves through Scotland, western England and Wales overnight. There'll also be reasonable covering of cloud spreading across the country overnight, with temperatures holding up into the mid-teens in many places. A warmer night compared with recent nights. But it's a dreary start to Thursday. Certainly a lot of low cloud around, especially towards southwestern parts. Some coastal mist and fog. And the rain and drizzle turning more heavy through the morning. Some outbreaks of more persistent wet weather moving through the south and southeast for a time. Further north, the rain is more showery, but it's a cloudy afternoon. And it's also going to be cooler as a result, with temperatures of 20 to 22 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our Super Summer Giveaway. With your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. Which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby, DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan.
GB News royalty with
your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have saved Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 24th of July. Live across the United Kingdom, this is Britain's Newsroom with Miriam Cates and Ben Leo, standing in for Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning to you. Kent soldier stabbing. A British soldier is fighting for his life after being attacked near an army barracks in Kent. GB News understands it's not terror-related.
And Sir Keir Starmer will take on Rishi Sunak at midday in his first PMQs as Prime Minister. We'll have all the build-up. And disgraced Desjardins, 6 times Olympic medalist Charlotte Desjardins has been banned from the Paris Olympics for whipping a horse's legs almost 30 times in a secret recording. Is a ban justified, or is it an overreaction?
And the figures are out. The royal accounts have been published. Biofuel Bentleys, solar panels on Windsor Castle. That's just 2 of the ways the monarchy is using your money. Charlie Peters has more.
£86 million. That's the latest sovereign grant. That's 77 pence per person. But where's the cash coming from, and how are they going to spend it?
It's going to be really interesting, isn't it, seeing Keir Starmer in the Prime Minister's seat at PMQs later. Do you think he'll be more agile than Rishi Sunak? Do you think he'll be more relaxed? How do you think it's going to go?
Well, he's had plenty of practice, hasn't he, as leader of the opposition for many, many years. I found it interesting earlier when you said that the people who ask questions of the Prime Minister from their own party, the PM gets briefed on it. But I always thought that worked the other way as well. So when the opposition asks questions, they also get briefed. But you said not.
Well, if the MP wants a helpful answer, so let's say they want the Prime Minister to say, yes, your hospital will be rebuilt in your constituency, then they will probably tell the Prime Minister in advance. But if it's a hostile question, if they're trying to catch the Prime Minister out, then they want to keep him on the spot.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how Rishi Sunak performs today, because I made the comment earlier that he's arguably been a little bit wet since losing the election, rubbing shoulders with Starmer, laughing and joking and, you know, being very statesmanlike and polite in Parliament. You liked that because it was you said it was a nice transition of power, but I think the Tories need a bit of fight today.
Well, we may well see that because, of course, Rishi Sunak and all the front bench have got recent experience of government. They know the figures, they know what's really going on, whereas, of course, Labour haven't known that for the last 14 years.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see some good back and forth across the dispatch box.
That's all to come. We've got a special show from 10 to 12 with Tom and Emily covering PMQs live, so stay tuned for that. But before we get stuck into anything else, Tatiana Sanchez has your news headlines.
And thank you. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says he's shocked and appalled by the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Kent. Witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening in Gillingham. Locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. GB News understands the attack is not being treated as terror-related. Sir Keir Starmer's to face his first Prime Minister's questions soon amid tensions on the backbenches after he suspended 7 Labour MPs. It's after the Prime Minister withdrew the whip from Labour rebels because they backed an SNP motion to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. The Commons voted with a majority 260 to reject the amendment. The cap, which was introduced by the Conservatives in 2015, restricts child welfare payments to the first 2 children born to most families. Shadow Education Secretary Damien Hines told GB News the government has some tricky questions to answer.
I think the bigger question is, what are some of the dividing lines, some of the disagreements within the Labour Party? You know, they've done pretty well in keeping that, you know, pretty much under wraps for the last few weeks and months coming up to and in the general election campaign, but there are difficult decisions for them to make. Look, they've known what the public finances are, and they've also known what their spending intentions are for some time, but they've managed to dodge the question of which taxes they're going to put up to be able to do the things that they have said they want to do. They're not going to be able to dodge that forever.
Meanwhile, nominations open this evening to succeed Rishi Sunak as the leader of the Conservative Party. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly announced last night he's running to take the party's top job. In a video emphasising his credentials, the former Foreign and Home Secretary said the Tories need to re-establish a reputation as the party that helps grow the economy and achieve their aspirations. He's the first to announce a leadership bid, and any challengers will need to get in quickly before nominations close on Monday. 2 state Bentleys used by the King are to be converted to run on biofuel over the next year amid a boost in profits from the Crown Estates. There are also plans to switch the Monarchy's entire fleet of official cars to run on electric, while solar panels have been used and introduced at Windsor Castle. It comes as the estate's profits hit £1.1 billion, all of which goes to the Treasury. It means the sovereign grant, which funds the monarchy, will increase from £86 million to £132 million. The funds will also be used to complete the final stages of renovations to Buckingham Palace. Now, a free trade agreement with India will be top of the agenda when the Foreign Secretary makes his first official trip to New Delhi. David Lammy is expected to press his Indian counterpart on what he's called driving forward greater growth for both countries. That means reiterating Britain's commitment to securing free trade with the country after negotiations by the previous government stretched on for 2 years without an agreement. Locking in the deal would deliver an economic boost, giving the UK better access to a market of around 1.4 billion people. Now, a diver has discovered a bronze cannon on the shipwreck of a warship that was destroyed by a gunpowder explosion in 1665. The 17th century ship, called the London, formed part of a convoy sent in 1660 to collect Charles II from the Netherlands and restore him to the throne. The prized cannon was discovered buried in silt and clay on the seabed, where the protected wreck lies in 2 parts off Southend Pier in Essex. And finally, blues pioneer John Mayall has been remembered as a major influence on rock and roll after his death at the age of 90. The songwriter died at his home in California on Monday, surrounded by his family. His influential band, the Blues Breakers, was a launching pad for stars including Eric Clapton and Mick Fleetwood. John Mayall was made an OBE in 2005 and he's survived by his 6 children, 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome back. It's 11:07. We've got some breaking news for you now that Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested at London's Heathrow Airport as they tried to gain access to the runway to disrupt flights. It's breaking in the last couple of minutes, so 9 arrests in 2 locations have been made at Heathrow this morning. Video footage, which we'll endeavour to bring you imminently, shows the group, of course, turning up on bikes before being apprehended by the police. And it's part of an international bid to stop flights all across Europe. So there's a similar situation going on in Germany, in Switzerland. 11 activists in Switzerland have blocked main roads both around Zurich and Geneva airports. The Met Police have given us a statement in the last couple of minutes. They said 9 Just Stop Oil activists have been arrested this morning for conspiring to disrupt Heathrow Airport. Thanks to the work of officers involved, those arrested have been taken into custody and the Met has prevented significant disruption to the airport and travelling public. And Heathrow, of course, I think it is the busiest airport in the world, if not one of the busiest. Of course, many families going on their summer holidays throughout the summer. And yet, who knows what could have happened if they'd managed to gain access to the runway, not least for the safety of those protesters. So just to reiterate, 9 Just Stop Oil protesters arrested this morning at Heathrow Airport as they were trying to gain access to the tarmac. Right, elsewhere, we have some emails to get through. Talking about it's Lisa Nandy's revelation that she's happy to leave the decision for sporting bodies to allow trans women to compete in women's sports or not, aka biological men. She's basically saying, am I right in saying she's basically saying it's down to the FA to decide or to the LTA to decide?
And of course, some sporting bodies have made a decision, no biological men in women's sports, but there are plenty that haven't. So the FA is the key one. It's the biggest sporting body in the country, and it does allow men in women's sport. But here's an email from somebody, which is quite a good idea. Why not make a separate category in sports for transgender people so they can compete against each other? Now, that's a good idea. Why not have an open category? Then people who are transgender can still play sport, but it doesn't impinge on women's fairness and dignity.
I'll tell you why. Because biological men, trans women who want to compete against slower, feebler women in their own sport and obviously win, they do it because they want domination and power over women. And I'd argue, I don't care what you say, I'd argue they hate women. And that's why they're competing in women's sports. They want to strip women of any pride, of any competitive spirit in their own sport, and that's why they do it. And if you ask me, it's the equivalent of me going down to my child's nursery and playing football with them in their playground and then celebrating at having beaten them. I think it's pathetic, and I think they're losers.
Well, the whole point of rules in sport is fairness. They're not there to discriminate against people, are they? They're there to make the sport fair. But I think you might get some emails about calling women feeble, Ben.
Well, no, I mean, not in that...
I know what you mean. Naturally, much less strong. You're absolutely right.
I've dunked myself in it with my sloppy language. No, I mean, it's a fact that the majority of men are... I mean, that's why
you're absolutely right, and we need to admit the facts of life. Anyway, any more emails? Getting off the tricky topics.
Just No more emails. I haven't got time. We're going to move on because Mark White is on standby. A British soldier, of course, the big story of the day, is fighting for his life after being stabbed outside of the Brompton barracks in Kent last night. The victim, who's in his 40s, is said to have been in uniform when he was attacked by a man wearing a ski mask. And police have since arrested a 24-year-old man on suspicion of attempted murder. And a GB News source says the stabbing is not being treated as a terror attack. I'm not sure. Is Mark White there? I think we're having some... Here we go, Mark. Hello, Mark. What's the latest?
Well, the sources that we've been speaking to say they're not currently treating this as a terrorist incident. That doesn't mean that in the light of further information further down the road things might change. But clearly an absolutely horrific and unprovoked attack on this officer, and it's been confirmed by the head of the army, the chief of the general staff, that this was an army officer who was walking in uniform when he was targeted and attacked by a knife-wielding suspect, stabbed multiple times. And we've been getting an indication from some neighbours around here about the horrific nature of that attack. I've just spoken to one neighbour, Alex Reynolds, who lives just a few doors up from where I'm standing, and he heard the sound of screams, captured it actually on his doorbell camera. We'll bring that to you a bit later, but understandably there's some swearing on that. It's quite distressing in nature, so we've just got to edit some of that material, and we'll bring that to you a little bit later, as well as an interview with Alex Reynolds and with his wife Natasha Reynolds. Now, Alex Reynolds told me that at just about 5 to 6 he heard the sound of screams. He was there with his father-in-law at the house at the time, and his father-in-law told him not to go out, but because he heard quite a lot of screams, he wanted to go to help to see what he could do. And at that point he saw this victim in military uniform lying on the ground with about half a dozen people around them trying to give assistance. There were no other military personnel, no police or paramedics at this time. They arrived in the minutes after that, and Alex Reynolds said it was a truly shocking scene. Clearly, he lives in this area. He's one of the few families in the area who are not military families, but of course they live in an area which is full of military families right next to the Brompton barracks. He said he never felt unsafe living in an area next to an army barracks, quite the opposite, but still very unsettling, very disturbing for him and his family, for all those that witnessed those events last evening.
And Mark, this brings back memories, doesn't it, of the shocking murder of Lee Rigby, I think, 11 years ago. Is there any sense that this is a similar kind of attack, or are we really very unclear on the motive at this point?
Well, it's certainly similar in the sense that a member of the military was targeted and attacked in an unprovoked attack like this. Whether it comes down to terrorist ideology at the end, we'll have to wait for the authorities to either confirm or to rule that out properly. But I remember 11 years ago I covered the story when Fusilier Lee Rigby was stabbed to death and nearly decapitated outside Woolwich Barracks in southeast London, and then the subsequent trial of those two terrorists, Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale. And Michael Adebowale, incidentally, was in his trial, his defence said, suffering from mental health issues as well. So even though there may be mental health issues at play, it doesn't mean that a person couldn't have been motivated by some kind of an ideology. Many of the people that terrorists recruit are often vulnerable in nature. So let's just see, as we go further into this investigation, actually what the motivation was for what was clearly a very brutal attack, unprovoked, on this army officer.
Thank you, Mark. And GB News will be bringing you all the updates on that story as we go throughout the day. Now, up next, a health advisor to the Labour government has said that the long-term sick must be forced to look for jobs to cut welfare cost. Does that sound like a good idea to you? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Miriam and Ben.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new two-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life, and he's there to do it. I mean, we mustn't forget that in, I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like. And he also helps people who are selling the magazine.
Big Issue, no?
Yes, The Big Issue. And he's worked all day long with the same man twice now. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
Where does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's, you know. And there will be a lot more. And he's been getting the money to do this. And I think it's he wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. It's 11:19. Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom on GB News. And also we're joined by the presence of former Labour MP Stephen Pound and broadcaster Mike Parry in the studio. Hello, chaps. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
Let's talk about long-term sick should have to seek work. I mean, this sounds like it's a Labour initiative that's being mooted or suggested by Alan Milburn.
Yes.
Sounds like a sort of right-wing policy, doesn't it?
Well, Alan Milburn's not in government anymore, is he?
No.
So he's coming as an advisor and put it to them. And as far as I can understand, there's no commitment yet from the present Work Secretary, Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall, to take it on. But the reason these stories always hit you in the face is because of the sheer numbers. Look at these again. A record 2.8 million people are off work because of long-term sickness, part of 9.4 million people neither in employment nor looking for a job, and with the cost of sickness benefits going to reach 64 billion by the end of this Parliament, we're all going to go bankrupt, aren't we, unless somebody does something?
I think you've got to say statistically, and I mean, you know, I come from a slightly sort of soft, liberal, lefty perspective on this.
Oh, really?
There are a lot of people who are simply shirkers. They're barrack room.
Of course they are.
On their Skype. I can still remember somebody coming to my surgery saying that they suffered from chronic agoraphobia and they couldn't work. And I said, well, hang on a second, you've just come 3.5 miles to my surgery. But look, the problem we have here is that the Alan Milburn, who is technically is in the House of Lords, he says that 7 out of 10 of those people on long-term sickness actually want to work. Now, whether they're just saying that or not, I don't know.
But if they want to work, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Stephen.
Sure
why don't they go to the job?
Can't we?
Why don't they go to the job centre? Go to the job centre and say, look, I want a job, please. There are plenty of vacancies. We can't fill vacancies in this country.
What it all comes down to, I'm afraid, yet again, it's stick and carrot. I mean, virtually every government will look at this. Every government that comes in will look at this great economic inactivity and think we shouldn't be paying them. They should be paying taxes. And the question is, how do you actually encourage it without ultimately sanctioning people and saying, I'm sorry, we're going to take away your benefits? The minute we do that, in this country, people say, well, what about the kids? You know, what about the rest of the
Stephen,
family?
isn't the problem is that not all sickness is the same? Obviously, there are some types of sickness where you absolutely can't work. But the rise that we've seen is actually in young people with anxiety and mental health problems. And surely the answer to that is not to stay at home, but is to get out to work.
But that figure's gone up 40% since the start of COVID. So suddenly, when people have been enforced into isolation at home, they've suddenly either thought, I quite like this, or they've completely lost confidence in going out into the world again and trying to look after themselves, because the state is very generous in this country and will look after them. But I totally agree with you. In my view, one of the best therapies for keeping yourself mentally alert is to work. And not working very much depresses me. We've all had periods in our life where we've gone on gardening leave, you know, between jobs and that sort of stuff. And I find that very depressing. So I just can't understand why people aren't self-motivated to go out and clean windows or wash cars or something.
I was talking to somebody in our job centre about this, because we've got Job Centre Plus where I'm in Ely. And he said, I'd never heard this expression before. People say, I'm feeling a bit bluesy. And I said, what does a bit bluesy mean? He says, well, I just can't get out of bed. Well, you know, everybody feels like that once in a while, but you're flipping, well, get out of bed, otherwise there's no food on the table.
Well, this is precisely what Nigel Farage was talking about in Parliament yesterday, and for weeks prior to that.
He's saying quite a bit that Nigel Farage.
He's saying, you know, let's incentive. At the moment, it doesn't pay. It doesn't pay to go to work.
No, it doesn't.
So if you can just stay off being sick with anxiety or whatever else, and you're getting paid for it, and it's going to be a detriment if you do go back to work, why would you? So,
but that was Ian Duncan Smith's point. When Ian Duncan Smith actually started bringing his legislation, the thing that there's a cliff edge whereby if you're on benefits, if you start work, you can actually be worse off working than you are on benefits.
Absolutely.
And Ian Duncan Smith had this idea that you could actually taper it so that you'd always be better off working. And yet we need to finish that job off. We need to. And I think, you know, I'm not going to be partisan. Give credit to Ian Duncan Smith.
The political question, though, is, Stephen, is let's say that the Labour government does adopt stricter sanctions around working. Will the backbenchers vote for it?
Well, I should imagine the usual suspects won't. But don't forget, only 5 voted against the child benefits.
But again, it would surely it would give people another reason to say we can now restrict the migrant problem, because if we can encourage more people in this country to take up the jobs which we have to bring migrants in to do, then surely it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
We're talking about the legal migrant problem.
Well, legal or illegal, because, you know, if you're going to pick fruit in a field or something...
hospitality, the obvious one. We cannot actually staff our own care sectors, our own people's homes, our sheltered houses.
And agriculture.
But some people would argue that because we've brought in so many migrants from abroad who are willing to work for low wages, care bosses just haven't raised the wages, and actually we need to stop the migration first, and then paying conditions will increase.
I mean, you've got to think, if you paid somebody £1 million to work in an old people's home, they'd do their job. So the point is the money is the issue, is the factor here. And at the moment, you're absolutely right. And it's, you know, people have actually taken the easy option and said, I bring somebody in from the Philippines, somebody in from Bangladesh, don't employ local people. We've got to restrict that legal input.
Maybe I'm just being a bit naive here, but I've never understood why some of the most important jobs in our country, nursery workers who look after your kids, you know, care home workers, nurses, they're just paid pittance for the most important jobs in the country. Teachers as well.
And when you mention young people, by the way, I'm certain a lot of these young people who are struggling to find their role in life is because they've gone to university and got a hopeless degree which is not valued in our society. Because too many young people go to university to take a degree not knowing what it's useful for or where it's going to take them.
None of this could matter, because apparently we should be ready to fight a major war within the next 3 years. That's according to the new head of the army, who says that Russia will seek revenge on the West for aiding Ukraine. So are you ready to get strapped up in your camo?
A very interesting story, this. And the new head of the army is General Sir Rowley Walker. And he says, we've got to be ready to fight in 3 years. To be honest, I thought the role of the British Army was to be ready to fight a war today, just in case anything happens. And it does sometimes. It happened in the Falklands, and we had to assemble a task force to go and do it. So, to me, almost, this is saying to those who would be enemies of our country, we're not ready to fight a war for the next 3 years.
Military doctrine says that, you know, you prepare for war, but you hope for peace. And I think the reality is that NATO is becoming increasingly important. But look, we had a strategic defence review in 1998, which decided that warfare is no longer, as it was in my day, when you've got one army in uniform, one navy in uniform, approaching each other across the plains or across the seas. You've now got civilianised asymmetric warfare, where if the person who you're fighting looks like the person you're defending in many cases.
But hasn't Ukraine actually reversed that thinking slightly? Because it is a much more conventional war. Russia is fighting a war in the same way it did in the Second World War.
And in the First World War, it's the trenches.
Absolutely, and yes, you have drones and you have better communications, but essentially it's an infantry war, isn't it? Do we not need more infantry?
It depends where we go from that. I mean, infantry is the one job that we should call them the poor bloody infantry. It's the worst possible job. But look, I mean, the thing is, it is becoming more mechanised. There's no question. I mean, the ships I served in had a crew of 140, 150. Now they've got a crew of about 70 or 80. So it's becoming more technical and technological. But what he's talking about here, I think, is a much bigger picture there, almost than who's actually going to do the fighting. Is the fighting going to happen? Because if Russia actually goes into a shooting war with NATO, then I'm sorry, but we're in DEFCON 1. We're actually...
OK. Stephen Pound, Mike Parry, thank you very much. I mean, we can't even stop small dinghies crossing the channel, let alone getting involved in the war with China.
But you're going to get called up, mate. At least we're...
I'm getting called up, am I?
National Service.
All right, well, we'll see.
Thank you very much to our panel. Still to come, will former US President Donald Trump shaking in his boots as the first national poll since the election shows that Kamala Harris is more popular than him? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Fine at first for many of us today, with some warm sunshine, especially in the east, although there will be the odd shower here as well. It then turns cloudier from the west by the end of the day as a frontal system pushes some outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland, West Wales, western parts of England and Scotland. Already the skies are turning cloudy in the west, and by the afternoon some outbreaks of rain arrive into the west of Wales, Cornwall, Northern Ireland. Western Scotland, odd shower, and the odd shower in the east of England as well. But actually here, plenty of sunny spells and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24 to 25 Celsius across a wide area, 26 in one or two spots. Cooler in the west as the cloud thickens and these outbreaks of rain turn up. Some heavy bursts into the southwest by the evening. And the rain will be fairly showery, so it'll be on and off, but there will be a lot of rain around, and that rain heading into Cumbria, southwest and west Scotland, Northern Ireland by the evening. Eastern Scotland clinging on to some late sunshine, highs here of 20 Celsius, 17 by the evening. And into the evening, many areas will see that cloud thicken as the frontal system moves west to east. And we're going to see those outbreaks of rain continuing with the cloud progressively lowering through the night to result in widespread hill fog and coastal mist by dawn. With the extensive cloud cover and a southwesterly airflow, temperatures will stay up in the mid-teens. So a relatively mild night and a warmish start to Thursday, even if it is gloomy out there. It will be particularly grotty around southwestern shores with a lot of mist and low cloud, some early drizzle, some outbreaks of more heavy rain moving along the south coast, showery further north and some brighter spells emerging towards the end of the day.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, welcome back. It's 11:30. Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom. Now, at 10 to 12, we have a very special programme starting for Prime Minister's questions. Tom and Emily will be on hand. They're also going to be reading out your questions for the Prime Minister that lots of you have been sending in to the email address. So that's at 10 to midday. And, of course, it's a key PMQs, Miriam, because it's Sir Keir Starmer's first as Prime Minister. So all eyes on that. 10 to midday. Stick around. But first, here's your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Ben, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Police in Kent say the stabbing of a British Army soldier near a barracks in Gillingham is not terror-related. Witnesses reported hearing a huge scream just before 6 o'clock. Yesterday evening, locals rushed to help the soldier just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, as they fled on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. The Prime Minister says he is shocked and appalled by the attack. Sir Keir Starmer is to face his first Prime Minister's questions in just under half an hour's time. The Prime Minister stripped the Labour rebels of the whip last night after they backed an SNP motion to scrap the two-child benefit cap. The Commons voted with a majority 260 to reject the amendment. The cap restricts child welfare payments to the first two children born to most families. Nominations open this evening to succeed Rishi Sunak as leader of the Conservative Party. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly announced last night he's running to take the party's top job. In a video emphasising his credentials, he said the Tories need to re-establish a reputation as the party that helps grow the economy and achieve their aspirations. Challengers will need to get in quickly, though, before nominations close on Monday. Two state Bentleys used by the King are to be converted to run on biofuel over the next year amid a boost in profits from the Crown Estate. It comes as the estate's profits hit £1.1 billion, all of which goes to the Treasury. It means the sovereign grant, which funds the monarchy, will increase from £86 million to £132 million. The funds will be also used to complete the final stages of renovations to Buckingham Palace. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More coming up soon.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2907 and 1.1904 euros. The price of gold is £1,872.14 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,145 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, could the Democrats in the US clutch victory in November's election? Well, according to the first national poll since Joe Biden withdrew from the race, Kamala Harris is apparently, if you believe the polls, more popular than Donald Trump. Well, let's find out more from American journalist Laurie Laird, who is stateside. Good morning, Laurie. I have a little bit of a gripe with this poll. It's a Reuters Ipsos poll. But the sample was fairly low, and also there was more Democrats answered than Republicans. Is that right?
Well, I think that, look, take this poll with a grain of salt. Actually, not even a grain of salt, the entire shaker and a big one, too. This came just after tumultuous news, right? We have never seen what's going on right now. I hesitate to use the word historic. We've overused it so many times in the run-up to the election, but this happened just after we got this news. We got the news that Biden was stepping down. Kamala Harris will be likely to be the Democratic nominee. She will get a poll bump from that. There's no question about that. So really take this with a grain of salt. This national poll, and as you say, a fairly small sample. It was done on the fly, done on the quick. The 2-point lead that she has opened up is well within the margin of error, which is 3 percentage points. So really, it's interesting news. It's a talking point for us. But I take this with, again, a big old shaker. The other thing that I think we need to look at is, as much as it's fun to talk about national polls aren't that relevant in the American electoral system. This election is going to come down to small votes, a small handful of votes in key swing states, Wisconsin, and we see Kamala Harris speaking in Wisconsin right here. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona. This is where the election will be decided. So the national polls give us a guide, but we need to look at the state polling as well.
And is there any sense yet of who her vice presidential nominee might be? Because, of course, that could make a difference to the polls as well.
Absolutely. And you bring up a very good point. And it looks pretty clear that the Democrats are going to look to a vice presidential candidate who can influence swing states. The name that really isn't on everybody's lips is a guy called Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, in fact, my home state, very popular in Pennsylvania and very popular. He has Republican support as well as Democratic support. Pennsylvania is probably the most important swing state. The problem with Mr. Shapiro, though, is he has been quite outspoken about what's going on in Israel. He's very pro-Israel. So he could bring that very important state of Pennsylvania when we look at the Electoral College, but he will lose the Democrats in Michigan without a doubt. Michigan has a very big Arab American population, and I do not think Michigan will go for Shapiro. So if you choose Shapiro, you get Pennsylvania, you lose Michigan.
Laurie, can I just play you this clip? I'm sure you've seen it, but for the benefit of our viewers at home who haven't, Donald Trump's vice president pick, J.D. Vance, a resurfaced clip from some years back where he's talking about the fact that he doesn't think politicians who don't have children really should be in their position because they don't have skin in the game. I think we can just show it to you now.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Is that going to be a problem for him, Laurie? Is he going to get skewered for that?
Oh my gosh, every time I see that, it gets more absurd, doesn't it? And I think the Republicans, have potentially a problem with J.D. Vance. He hasn't been vetted all that well. He's only been in the Senate since the last election, very little experience. And a couple of my sources in the Republican Party, one who's really quite high up, says that they are worried about this. And specifically, they're worried about a September surprise or an October surprise, something that the Democrats may be sitting on that's revealed closer to the election. And certainly J.D. Vance is a risk for something to come out that could be damaging. That said, the Republicans, particularly Donald Trump, seem to be immune to this sort of thing. Remember, Donald Trump won the election a couple of weeks after he bragged about, sexually assaulting women. So those sorts of things seem to matter more for the than the Republicans.
Isn't this indicative of what's going on in Western politics at the moment? Because here in the UK, people are fed up of career politicians. They want people who are maybe a bit more genuine, who have spoken their mind in advance. But, of course, the risk with that is that something will come up that is unpalatable, that could scupper their career. Are there similar feelings in the States?
Absolutely. Although, in this election, make no mistake about it, this will be fought in personal terms. Kamala Harris will try and go after Donald Trump, calling him anti-democratic. She will bring up January 6th, right after the last election. I think that will feature quite prominently. It will be personal, and I think the Republicans will focus on Kamala Harris. The narrative that's coming up in Republican circles is that Kamala Harris was a diversity pick when she was chosen for vice president. She's an inclusion candidate, and a lot of Republicans have been really raising questions about her abilities. And and saying, look, she's not up to the job. She was chosen because she's a Black woman. And look at that. Wait for that narrative to really sort of take effect. I think it'll run sort of underneath the Republican campaign. And the Republicans seem to be saying, look, white men have been excluded, right? They are being pushed aside for inclusion candidates. And I think the Republicans will lean into that theme.
OK, Laurie Laird, fascinating, and I can't wait for this. Well, is it an exclusive you just dropped, a September or October surprise when it comes to JD Vance?
We'll come back to you then.
Republicans are worried about that.
OK.
Not from me. I'm just passing on the message.
Yeah, just mooting the idea. OK, Laurie Laird, US political journalist, thanks very much.
Thank you, Laurie.
I mean, if there is a September, October surprise, I mean, who knows whether it will have an effect anyway. The Access Hollywood tapes with Trump and the incident she mentioned there, I mean, it had no effect whatsoever.
Things seem to bounce off Trump, don't they?
Yeah.
But up next, after the break, we'll be hearing from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, following that dreadful stabbing of a soldier in Gillingham. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War, restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
11:44, Ben and Miriam with you on Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. Now to the big story of the day. Soldiers fighting for his life after he was stabbed in Kent last night. GB News understands it was not terrorism, and Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has given her reaction. Take a listen.
Appalling attack on a serving soldier. I know the whole country's thoughts will be with the soldier and his family and wishing him a speedy recovery. This is a live investigation at the moment by Kent Police. I'm being kept updated, but I know everyone will want to support Kent Police in their investigation.
Yeah, it just triggers really horrible memories of Fusilier Lee Rigby's murder, doesn't it, Miriam, 11 years ago today? I mean, we don't know the circumstances surrounding this, but it's, I mean, what we do know is that it's one of our men, one of our serving soldiers.
That's what makes it so significant, isn't it? It's obviously dreadful if anyone has stabbed, but these are the people who are literally giving their lives to protect our country. They should be safe here, if anywhere.
There was some really sort of shocking detail in the newspapers this morning. Apparently the wife of the soldier who was attacked heard his screams. She rushed out the house in the barracks, which was 50 yards away, to intervene. I mean, it's amazing that she wasn't attacked as well. And, yeah, apparently the person involved, the attacker, licked the knife clean of blood. I mean, it's graphic, but it's something I think we should be aware of. Anyway, we pray for the soldier who's fighting for his life, and it's a moving investigation, so we can't talk about it too much. However, we'll bring you the updates as the day progresses. Moving on, though, to the royal family. Solar panel castles and biofuel Bentleys. King Charles's royal palaces have gone green in his first year as monarch.
The monarch is to receive a boost of more than £45 million, with a 53% jump in its official annual income to more than £130 million next year. OK, we're joined now by our GB News national reporter, Charlie Peters, who's live from Buckingham Palace. Charlie, what's the latest?
Well, the changing of the guard just took place here, so thousands of tourists who are gathering to watch that are moving on. We saw soldiers from the Household Division, the King's Guard, and indeed members of the Household Cavalry on parade here. But that's all paid for by the MOD, and we're here to talk about the big palace behind me, the cause of so much of the cash going into the royal household at the moment, which is to refurbish Buckingham Palace, because the sovereign grant for the last year, 2023 to 24, is £86.3 million. That's the additional part of the grant, because the core grant is £51.8 million. That's 15% of all of the profits from the Crown Estates portfolio. They give all their profits to the Treasury and they hand back 15%. That makes up the core grant, the additional 10% going towards the refurbishment of Buckingham Palace. So if you think your taxes are high, here at the Royal Household it's 75%, so they're paying a pretty penny on everything that comes out of that £16 billion Crown Estate portfolio. As you said, their profits have surged this year, but they won't see the benefit of that in terms of what they're allowed to spend on their staff and their activities for a couple more years, because the sovereign grant is based on 2 financial years prior. So with that £51.8 million, the core grant, what did they spend it on? Well, the vast majority goes on paying for the staff of the royal household. There are over 500 working around Buckingham Palace, and they've taken salaries of £31.9 million. Beyond that, the second biggest expense is travel, attending those royal engagements. That's £4.2 million, and the most costly of those trips was a trip to Kenya, well over £170,000 to facilitate that trip from the King and the Queen, and they also had a trip to France as well, the first 2 big engagements since the King's coronation last May. That cost £800,000 for the household, much of that resizing the imperial crown and getting the robes refitted for the King and the Queen in preparation for that significant national event. Now, what else is the cash going on? Well, they're keen to point out here at Buckingham Palace that this is a monarchy for modern times. They are in keeping with some of the national political trends that we're seeing, possibly a slight change in how things are previously done. They're keen to point out not only their green credentials, but also their diversity credentials, because 11.4% of the staff are from an ethnic minority background. That's against a target of 15% set for next year. Many people don't know this, but there are racial quotas for staff in Buckingham Palace, and in fact they have a target of what they need to hit. And on to the green stuff, well, a palace spokesperson yesterday at a briefing in Buckingham Palace told us about the extensive plans to put sustainable aviation fuel in all of the royal transport that takes place, particularly by charter plane and also by helicopters. They're bringing in 2 more helicopters. That'll be purchased by His Majesty's Treasury, not by the sovereign grant. Those will be Augusta Westland aircraft, replacing the current aircraft, those rotary wings that have been in service for 15 years. So new cash coming in for those events, and they'll be funded by and fueled by the sustainable green eco-fuel.
Wow, Charlie Peters, you are certainly across the detail. Thank you so much for that report, and we'll come back to you later on during the day. Yeah, amazing detail in the accounts for the royal family. Prince William earned something like £24 million in his private investments as the Duchy of Cornwall, which he does actually pay tax on, believe it or not.
A lot of tax. I think what people sometimes forget is that it's not a choice between the royal family and nothing. If we didn't have the royal family, we would need another head of state. And if you look at France or America or many other countries, the presidential system costs a lot of money too. So it's not a kind of royal family or nothing, and I know which one I prefer.
Yes, definitely. Right, still to come, the Prime Minister takes on Rishi Sunak at PMQs imminently at midday. Stay with us for all the build-up with Tom and Emily. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Aidan, how's your weather?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome along to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Fine at first for many of us today, with some warm sunshine, especially in the east, although there will be the odd shower here as well. It then turns cloudier from the west by the end of the day as a frontal system pushes some outbreaks of rain into Northern Ireland, West Wales, western parts of England and Scotland. Already the skies are turning cloudy in the west, and by the afternoon some outbreaks of rain arrive into the west of Wales, Cornwall, Northern Ireland. Western Scotland, odd shower, and the odd shower in the east of England as well. But actually here, plenty of sunny spells and feeling warm in that sunshine with highs of 24 to 25 Celsius across a wide area, 26 in one or two spots. Cooler in the west as the cloud thickens and these outbreaks of rain turn up. Some heavy bursts into the southwest by the evening, and the rain will be fairly showery, so it'll be on and off, but there will be a lot of rain around, and that rain heading into Cumbria, southwest and west Scotland, Northern Ireland by the evening. Eastern Scotland clinging on to some late sunshine, highs here of 20 Celsius, 17 by the evening. And into the evening, many areas will see that cloud thicken as the frontal system moves west to east. And we're going to see those outbreaks of rain continuing with the cloud progressively lowering through the night to result in widespread hill fog and coastal mist by dawn. With the extensive cloud cover and a southwesterly airflow, temperatures will stay up in the mid-teens. So a relatively mild night and a warmish start to Thursday, even if it is gloomy out there. It will be particularly grotty around southwestern shores with a lot of mist and low cloud, some early drizzle, some outbreaks of more heavy rain moving along the south coast, showery further north, and some brighter spells emerging towards the end of the day.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far, and it could be yours. Charles was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive?
incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. That's all from Miriam and myself today. We're back tomorrow, but we're going now live to Tom Harwood and Emily Carver for a special PMQs live. See you tomorrow.
You are indeed. We are back for the first PMQs after the general election. It is, of course, Sir Keir Starmer's first Prime Minister's questions as Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak as Leader of the Opposition. It's that time of the week for you to be sending in all of your questions. What do you, our viewers and listeners, what would you ask?